Hey guys, Zomfox here, and over the past month, pretty much every single thing you've heard regarding the USFL and XFL has been in regards to the merger. Whether it be it becoming official that they have agreed to the merger, whether it be the 8 teams that are going to last, or whether it be the dispersal draft details or the dispersal draft, which is going to be tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, if you're watching this day this video comes out. Pretty much all the news has been just about that. But there have been some other pretty big stories that I haven't really talked about on here. Essentially, stories that are important, really cool, or just need to know info that didn't warrant their own video. And that is what this might become a series of the monthly minor news recap, where I'll be going over all the minor stories that are still important or pretty major, but don't really warrant their own video for one reason or another. Today we have 7 stories to go over, so if you like this type of content, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Naturally, Merry Day after Christmas. I hope you all got gifts you loved or got great gifts for people you love. I was gifted this Pittsburgh Maulers jersey, even though it sucks they're not going to make it. They are my second favorite team across both leagues. Watching them at the title game was a great experience, and I love getting this. So without further ado, though, let's get right into the video. The first story to cover is going to be defensive lineman Boogie Roberts leaving the Pittsburgh Maulers to go sign with the San Antonio Brahmas of the XFL. He has signed a letter of intent with them, meaning he technically isn't a part of the team yet, but he is saying that if they send him a contract, he'll sign it. Is pretty much how it works in a sense. This is a pretty big deal. He was one of the best players in the entire USFL getting TFLs, as he was tied for fourth in the whole league, and he's joining the team that had the most TFLs. Now, I know people are going to wonder about how the dispersal draft works and keeping the highest end players and all that, but this was before all that news came out, and barring any major upset, I think it's pretty clear he is going to be going to the Brahmas, but it's not confirmed. But this is going to be a huge addition to the Brahmas if he is able to go there. The team was also one of the best teams at getting sacks, as they were third in the league, and while they were far behind the Roughnecks, them being as high as they were in TFLs and getting a guy like Boogie to help them, if they can bring back pretty much their entire defensive line and linebacking core, this is going to be an insanely great add to the team, as Boogie also did get 3 sacks last year. And of course, he's one of the most famous players among spring football fans, the mayor himself, huge name. So it's a huge add to the Brahmas, which is definitely a pretty insane thing. Now, the next story is going to be the DC Defenders, Pooka Williams being arrested. This also happened earlier in December. This was a pretty big deal. This came out of pretty much left field. Essentially, he did like one charge that wouldn't have been a huge big deal. I believe he was driving past a stop and he didn't stop. Not like a stop, but a traffic violation or something, but he just kept going away. Essentially, what happened is he evaded arrest with detention with a vehicle, is what the main charge was, but also unlawfully carrying a weapon, evading arrest, and criminal trespassing, because he ended up like barging into someone's home and trying to hide out in their garage. Now, the thing is that Pooka Williams, while as an actual skill position player, pretty much did nothing for him, he was actually a really good kick returner. The playoffs and the end of the year when he was able to get those touches as a kick returner, he proved to be a very, very good player. As you can see, of all the guys that had 273 or more yards, which is what he had the best return average. As even though he only returned 10 kicks, he averaged 27.3 yards per return, which is a huge deal. Now, if the kickoff rule ends up going to be back to the USFL, like a lot of people hope, it'll be weird to see how he adjusts to that, but I would assume he'd adjust well to it. But that's the question. Does he stay on the team? While recording this, he is still part of the team, so there's a good chance that he will be on the roster next year. It's just the fact that this is his second time being arrested. He was arrested back at Kansas back in 2018, also around December 8th, except this was December 7th. Pretty funny. So, almost exactly 5 years ago to that day, he had been arrested again. Hopefully, he can get his act together and he can go back to this team, as if he has a full season with them, he could legitimately compete to be the UFL kick returner. We'll see what happens with that. Now, the next story is one of the coolest ones we've seen. XFL Arlington Renegades ticket rep Brian Goldsmith set a Guinness Book World Record. What he did was he ran a marathon in full football uniform, and he broke the record for it. Marathon, for those of you who don't know, is 26.2 miles, and what he did was he broke the record by an Australian runner who had the record of 3 hours, 33 minutes, 42 seconds, and he beat it by getting 3 hours, 29 minutes, and 30 seconds. Essentially, he beat the record by 4 minutes. Very, very impressive. This is a really cool thing, especially having the XFL trophy on hand for him to get a couple great shots with it. This is a really cool thing as just a publicity type of thing. It's not anything to do with the football itself, but it's just a really cool PR thing, and it's just a really nice thing to see. Now, the next story is going to be probably the most minor, and that's John Atkins re signing with Showboats. I don't mean to be offensive with that. It's just that of all the big names we've seen, this is the lowest of the huge names. But John Atkins was an all USFL player. Don't get me wrong, he was really good. He was an all USFL DT. Well, I have my personal grievances with Shad missing out on that spot. The fact was, he still was one of the top 5 defensive tackles. His 4 TFLs was in the top 25. He was actually really high in pass defenses, which is pretty incredible since he is a DT, as he was tied for 3rd in that regard. 2.5 sacks. Overall, really solid player. Helped make that Showboats defense a very formidable unit during their win streak. Great ad to have back. Now we move on to one of the more weird ones. Essentially, when all the news was coming out regarding the emails to the XFL players and the USFLPA statements to the players, we had this UFPA announcement come out. Essentially, the statement was them saying that they will no longer be working with the United Steelworkers Union, saying that the USW had basically done nothing to help them out during the merger and had overall been pretty much terrible for them, and that's why they were leaving them. Note the UFPA. You see, that's not the USFLPA. That's the UFPA, the United Football Players Association, not the United Football League's Player Association. Essentially, this wasn't the real one. You know what I mean? The actual USFLPA, both their vice president and president, basically said that this was total BS. Chris Rowland also said that, wide receiver of the Stars, saying that this UFPA was totally untrue. This is an organization, the UFPA, that has existed for a couple of years, pretty much since the 2020 XFL, but it is not actually really affiliated with the USFLPA. The USFLPA is its own thing that's been working with the USW, and everyone's in that group has basically said that this is completely not true. If it wasn't for the USW, they wouldn't have gotten their incredible pay increase and all the benefits they got back heading into the 2023 season. And essentially, this is just this weird way of the UFPA trying to get a bunch of clout or something. They ended up posting a video to their players on the YouTube channel. Essentially, it's just this really weird situation. The bottom line was, for about 2 hours, this was like the biggest story in spring football, until you had all the players and the presidents and actual higher-ups of the actual USFLPA saying that it was total BS, that this UFPA has nothing to do with them, and it's just pointless. And now we go into the last couple stories, which both revolve around Mark Thompson. The first one that came out was Mark Thompson giving out his All-Dispersal team. Yeah, I know, this is definitely the definition of minor news. Essentially, with the dispersal draft coming out tomorrow, I'm 95% sure it is tomorrow, December 27th, he made this All-Dispersal team. Now, I don't know if he purposely didn't put himself in or he genuinely thinks he's the 3rd best player, but overall, it's a pretty solid list. Kind of funny, any of them for the long snapper. But overall, really solid list. I agree with almost all of it. I think this is a really, really great one. There's a lot of players that are going to be up for it, and Case Cookus is definitely the best quarterback. Same with Corey Coleman being the number 1 receiver. The only one I wouldn't say is Wes Hills being over Vito, Darius Victor, for those you don't know. I think Victor is the 2nd best player in the modern USFL's history, only behind Mark Thompson. I would rather have Darius than Wes Hills, that's just me. But overall, a really solid list, a cool thing that he did out of completely nowhere. He's been pretty much the number 1 guy in talking about this whole thing. And that's kind of why it was such a huge shock that he has officially re-signed to go back to the Gamblers. People are wondering what's going to happen, whether the Gamblers stays the Gamblers or go to the Roughnecks. I'm in the majority that hope they stay the Gamblers. It makes no sense to go to the Roughnecks. Hopefully this is a sign that they stay as the Gamblers. But the fact is that the team itself, the Houston team, just got a huge boost. There was no guarantee he was going to come back. Back a while ago, people thought he would go to the Stallions. Then, as soon as free agency really started, he had all the beef with J-Mart. It was very clear he wasn't going to go there. Then it was, does he go to the Breakers? Does he go to the Showboats? And instead, he is back with the Gamblers. This is a huge ad for them, naturally, or huge re-sign. The 2 games he missed, they lost both those games. If he had played those 2 games, maybe the Gamblers end up making the playoffs. He was incredible this past season. 14 rushing touchdowns in 8 games was an absurd stat line. This is a humongous ad for the Gamblers, and it's definitely going to be interesting to see what he can do with a full season. So that'll do it for the first edition of the monthly minor news, this one being December 2023. As I said at the beginning, if you like this content, make sure to like the video and subscribe so I know to keep doing this every month. And as always, guys, have a great night.